Hello and welcome to exercise 55, creating a rubber duck in your Rhino Training Manual Level 1. For this model, we will be using the template small objects millimeters. Open. So you can use layers to separate your parts, but for this model, it's not going to be necessary. So let's go ahead and begin by creating the body and the head shapes of this rubber duck. The body and the head of the duck are created by modifying two spheres. The size and placement of the spheres does not need to be exact. This is very much a free-form exercise, so keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and begin in our front viewport. And you can either access the command from here, which is sphere, center, radius, or you can come up here and go to solid, sphere, center, radius. And in this case, I'm just going to, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to start at the origin point with grid snap on, just to make my mirror command a little bit easier later down the line. Now, the exact size doesn't necessarily matter. That's kind of case-by-case basis. And I'll go ahead and take this to rendered in my perspective viewport so I can see what's going on. And here I'll go ahead and take that to shaded so I can also get a sense of the forms that I have going on right now. And then my next step is going to be to repeat this procedure to create a second sphere. And my second sphere is going to be a little bit up and to the right. This is going to be the head of the duck. Like so. Okay, and then you can kind of see what you've done in your perspective viewport, and you might move things if you need to at this point, trying to get it closer to the body. And I'm going to go ahead and use my elevator mode to make sure things don't move too far in the wrong direction. Okay, there we go. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to deform these spheres so that we can kind of mold them digitally to take on the properties, the physical properties of this rubber duck. So now go ahead and select both of your spheres. You can multi-select with Shift, and then go ahead and go to the Edit menu and select Rebuild. And in your Rebuild Surface prompt box, you're going to change the point count to 8 for both U and V. Like so. And then go ahead and change the degree to 3 if it isn't already set for U and V as well. Next, check Delete Input, clear current layer, and then click OK. There we go. The spheres are now deformable. Having more control points allows more control over smaller parts of the surface. A degree 3 surface will have a smoother shape when deformed. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and work in my front viewport, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to wireframe. And it's important to be able to see the ISO curves for the following steps. So if you don't see them, much like you see here, what you can do is click on the pull-down menu in your viewport title bar and scroll down to Display Options. And once you get your Rhino options dialog box, make sure show ISO curves is checked, and then hit OK. And now you can see those ISO curves that again are going to be important for the following steps. All right, so let's go ahead and select the large sphere. And then from our edit menu, click control points. And here we want them on, so go ahead and turn control points on. And notice the shortcut key for control points is F10. All right, so now we can clearly see our control points for our larger sphere. Now, in the front viewport, select the control points near the bottom of the sphere. And you can do this with a window selection like so, and select all of the control points, once again, that are near the bottom of the sphere. So do not grab the control points that exist in the exact center. Now let's go to the transform menu. And now click set X, Y, Z coordinates right here. In the set points dialog box, check set Z, this one right here, and align to world like you see here. And then go ahead and uncheck set X and set Y, and then click OK. Now you can go ahead and drag these selected control points up, and you can snap to one of the uppermost selected parts like you see here, right? And now we've essentially flattened the bottom of that sphere. All right, moving on. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off the control points, edit, control points off. And the next thing I'm going to do is scale the sphere shape in one dimension. I'm going to make it larger. So I'm going to go ahead and select my larger sphere, and then from my transform menu, I'm going to select scale 1D. For the origin point, pick a point near the center of the body of the sphere. For the first reference point with ortho on, right? So make sure ortho is actually on. Pick a point to the right in your front viewport, right? And then for the second reference point, pick a point further to the right in your front viewport to kind of stretch it out like you see here. Get a little bit larger, like so. Now you'll see the body is shaped like an ellipsoid. All right, moving on. Now we're going to reshape the chest and the tail. And notice as I'm working that I'm keeping my perspective viewport open so I can clearly see that things are being modeled as I intend them to be modeled. So once again, turn your control points on. Select your large sphere on the bottom, and then edit, control points on. Now you're going to window select the control points at the top right of the body, and you're going to drag them to the right to bulge out the chest. So you're going to do a bit of a window selection here, right, to grab those control points, and I accidentally selected the smaller sphere on top, so I'm going to deselect it using control. And now drag them to the right to bulge out the chest of this rubber duck. And my ortho is on, so I'm going to turn that off so I have a little bit more liberty here with my movements. There we go, and I'm going to check to make sure everything is copacetic in my perspective viewport. Okay, we're good. Now I'm going to move this guy around just a little bit so it's not going directly into the body of the duck and turning ortho back on to make sure I don't lose my alignments. Next, we are going to be adding control for further shaping the tail. Before we start to edit the tail further, first we're going to need to add an additional set of points to the tail portion of the body. So from your edit menu, select control points and then insert knot. For the surface for knot insertion, pick the body surface, like so. And you're going to want to make sure that you're inserting this in the V direction. If it's not, and it's highlighted right now as white, if it's not, yours might look like this, and you'll see the direction has changed. So we need to make sure that it is actually going in the V direction. So change the direction if necessary until it reflects what you see here on the screen. And then what you're going to want to do is pick a point that's midway between the tail and the center of the body, just like this. And that's it. And then right click to finish the command. Now we can turn on the control points to see where they have been added. So edit, control points on, select objects for control point display, and there you see now we have 2 additional control points, which now can be window selected and dragged down and pushed in, again, to further shape the tail. Next, we're going to deform the smaller sphere to create the head. So let's go ahead and work in our front viewport and go ahead and select the smaller sphere. And let's turn on those control points, edit, control points on. Now select the control points on the right side and drag them to begin forming the bill, like so, and then drag them. There we go. And remember, it's important to window select these control points because there isn't just one, right? If I were to just select this one control point, it can be deceiving, right? If you select it in perspective and you don't do a window selection or a multi-select holding down shift, because you might only be grabbing one when your intention might be to be grabbing all of them all the way through, right? And once you're done, you can go ahead and hit escape to turn all of your control points off. Now, before I move forward, I would really like to massage this form a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and move the head of this duck a little bit further down and to the right. Like so. There we go. Next, we're going to separate the bill from the head. For the final rendering, the bill must be a different color from the body. To do this, they must be separate surfaces. You can split a single surface into multiple surfaces many ways. The following technique is just one. So in the front viewport, I'm going to create a curve that I'm then going to use to split the bill from the head of the duck. I will be using the interpolate points curve. And you're going to want your curve to look something like this. I'm going to push this one a little bit more. There we go. So you want a curve that looks something like that. Again, this is a very free-form exercise. It doesn't have to be quote-unquote perfect, right? Now we can go ahead and run the split command. Edit, split, and select objects to split. Go ahead and select the entire head, and then enter when done, and then go ahead and select the curve for the select cutting objects prompt, and then enter or right click when done. And now you'll see the surfaces have in fact been separated according to this curve. Next, we're going to create the duck's neck. First, we're going to make an edge on the surface of the head, and then we're going to make a corresponding edge that's parallel on the surface of the body, so that we can then create a blended surface between these two edges. So I'm going to begin by drawing a line on the top portion of the body, like so. And I'm going to copy this line to the bottom of the head, making sure it does in fact intersect the surface, like so. Now, select the lines, and we're going to trim these surfaces using those lines. So go type in trim, enter. For select object to trim, select the top of the surface of the body and the bottom of the surface of the head. And you'll notice what has happened in your perspective viewport. Should look like this, or something very similar. Okay. Next, we're going to blend the surfaces between the head and the body. So go ahead and hit escape to deselect everything. So from your surface menu, go ahead and select blend surface. For the first edge, select the bottom of the head. For the second edge, select the hole at the top of the body. And then press enter or right click when done to move on to the next stage. And here you can see a preview of what's going on. Your default settings for the most part are okay, so you can hit OK. And if you need to, let's say you have a little bit of deformation. So let's go ahead and reselect the edges. Here in this stage where you see this prompt box for adjust surface blend, this is where you can click and drag to pull these curves to give them a little bit more definition, like so. And then you can go ahead and hit OK to finalize that command. Now we're going to join the parts. Go ahead and select the body, the blend surface, and the back of the head. From the Edit menu, select Join. All three surfaces are now joined into one, and the bill is left separate for rendering purposes. Next, we're going to make the eye for the rubber duck. For this part of the exercise, we're going to make a curve and revolve it to get the surfaces necessary for the eye. For this exercise, for this part of the exercise, I'm going to be working in front viewport. Now, I'm going to turn on grid snap. That's going to be very helpful for these next few steps. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a conic curve. So you can go to curve and select conic. Now, for your start of your conic, you're going to want to think proportionately. Remember, we're making an eyeball here, right? So you don't want to do something extremely large. Think of making a curve that's about half the size of the eyeball that's proportionate to this rubber duck. So here we go. I'm going to start by making a click here. One click. That's click one. And move up and over to create click two. And then over here to create the apex, click three. And lastly, it's asking for my curvature point, and you can move this with your cursor. I'm going to stop right around here. And there I have my conic curve. Next, we're going to place some points as almost like reference points. So we're going to go to curve, point object, multiple points. And you're going to want to place a point here, and then Smart Track will be very helpful to make sure you're actually catching the end of the conic curve in that intersection. And then that's where I'm going to make my second click. And ergo, now I have 2 points dropped in place. Next, I'm going to split the curve. Much like we had to split the head from the bill of the duck, the same thing applies here, so we can separate the iris from the eyeball. So we're going to create a line, just a traditional polyline, and then for the purposes of this portion of the exercise, I'm going to turn off grid snap, so I have a little bit more liberty, and I do want it to be a orthogonal line. So I'm going to turn on ortho, like so. And now I'm going to actually split the conic curve with this orthogonal line. So I can type in split into my command bar. Select the conic curve as the object to split, and then the orthogonal line as the cutting object, and then enter or right click when done. And now you have split the conic curve in two. I'm going to move over a little bit in my perspective viewport so I can see what's happening as I move forward into the revolve command, which will produce a three-dimensional result. So select both parts of the conic curve, and from the surface menu, click revolve. Surface, revolve. For the start of revolve axis, click the point that you created. For the end of revolve axis, pick the top end of the conic curve. For the start angle prompt in your command bar, click full circle. And there you have essentially the eyeball. Now let's assign a material color to the eyeball. Let's go ahead and make that black. So let's go to our materials panel and use a new material. And go ahead and change the custom settings to the color black. Okay, there we go. And if you go to rendered, you'll be able to see the material changes that you have made. Now we're going to actually place the eyeball on the head. So in our top viewport, select both parts of the eye. And then from your edit menu, go ahead and click groups and then group. Edit, groups, group. And remember, you also have the option to type these commands directly into the command bar. And now you'll see that these two parts of the eye are grouped together. Next, go to your transform menu and select orient on surface. For base point, snap to the point at the center of the eye. So you might want to make sure you have your center O snap on. In case you don't, go ahead and turn that on so you can accurately catch that center O snap. And for reference point for scaling and rotation, snap to the point at the edge of the eye. Oh, I might have better luck catching it. Hold on. I think I have too many O snaps on. Bear with me. Let me turn some of this stuff off. There we go. Next, my command bar wants to know surface to orient on. Go ahead and pick the head. And you're going to get an orient on surface dialog box. In this dialog box, for scale, check prompt and rigid, like so, and then click OK. And now, when you move your mouse over the surface of the head of the duck, you'll see that it will place it rather nicely, by the way, onto that surface. So go ahead and pick a spot to designate the location of the eye for this duck. And keep in mind, you also have one more step here, which is the scale factor. For the scale factor, you can drag your mouse and stop and click once you have a size that you find satisfactory, like so. And there we have one eyeball on the rubber duck. Now we can go ahead and mirror the eye to the other side of the head. Select the eye and type in the command mirror in your command bar. And remember, from the very beginning, I made my model from the origin point. So in this case, I can mirror directly from there, like so. Next, we can add some material properties to the bill. Let's go ahead and make the bill orange. And the body yellow. Oh, there you go. Like so. All right. Now, lastly, we can run a rendering. Going to move this out of the way so it's not in the way of my rendering. You can also delete it. It's entirely optional. And I'm also going to delete these reference lines that were used in the exercise. And render. Render. All right. And lastly, keep in mind, you also have the option, as always, to go back to your material properties and add some, say, gloss, or maybe some reflective properties or transparency to your materials. Render, render. And you can play with the material properties, the glossiness, etc., until you get the most favorable results. And that concludes exercise 55.